And we will hit record on this as well. I believe we are ready to go. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Bart Davis. I'm one of the assistant directors of the NIAA, the chair of our realignment committee for fall 25 through spring of 2028. And at this time, we will go ahead and call our meeting of our realignment committee on May 30th, 2024 at 1:31 p.m. to order. We'll start off with our roll call. Please do indicate that you are here by saying so when your name is called. Brooke Formaster.
Here.
Thank you. Joshua Katz.
Here.
Thank you. Miles Baldwin. Oops, Miles just came into the waiting room. Give me just a second to let him in. We'll come back to him in just a moment. David Vick.
Here.
Thank you. Sean Fitzsimons.
Here.
Thank you. Ken Parker.
Here.
Thank you. Mr. Baldwin from Wells, are you with us now? Miles Baldwin.
Yep, just got here.
Thank you. Mike Brooks.
Here.
Thank you. Sarah Scott. Okay. Jay Berkeley. Okay. Dallas Larson.
Present.
Thank you. Jason Odegaard. Okay. Rob Cottrell. Wade Pearson.
Here.
Thank you. Paul Sullivan. Greg Cole.
Here.
Thank you. Tammy Habig. Lou Marcoussis.
Present.
Thank you. Tammy, could you say you were here? Because I do see you in the list. Maybe you were muted.
Yeah. Can you
Okay,
hear me?
thank you.
No?
I could
Okay.
not. Thank you.
Okay.
Tony Polzian.
I'm here.
Thank you. Art Anderson.
Here.
Thank you. Darvell Bell.
Here.
Thank you. Freeman Holbrook.
Here.
Thank you. Chris Magram. Mike Kofer.
I'm here.
Thank you. Domingo Rivera.
Here.
Thank you. Timothy Jackson.
Present.
Thank you. Bob Levitt.
Here.
Thank you. Bart Davis is here. Lori Lotz.
Here.
Thank you. Paul Anderson.
Here.
Thank you. Paul Sullivan just came in, so it appears he is now here as well. Ms. Lotz, just double checking. We do have a quorum here, I believe. We were missing a few, but I think we're still good. Is that what you have as well?
Yes, you are good.
Perfect. Okay. Let's move on to item number 3, which is the approval of today's agenda, May 30th, 2024. It's part of the packet and a part of the agenda that was also sent out to members of our committee. I do ask humbly that when we get to item number 8, especially, we might kind of change up the order of the proposals based on people that we have here to present. So whoever does, if somebody does make this motion, if you'd consider making it a flexible motion for us, we would really appreciate that. We will open it up now, looking for a motion to approve today's agenda.
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I will say, yeah, let's approve this agenda with making it a flexible agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Larson, for that motion. Do we have a second?
Tony Polzine, 4A5A South. I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Polzine. Any other questions or discussion on this item? Okay, hearing none. If you are in favor, please indicate by saying aye. We'll give you just a second to unmute. Again, please say aye if you're in favor.
Aye.
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 If you are opposed to this motion, please say nay. We'll give you a second or two to get ready. Again, if you're opposed, please say nay. Okay. Thank you, everybody. That motion does pass. I am going to go ahead and share my screen here so that we can get to a few items that everybody does need to see. Our next item is item number 4, which is the approval of the April 16th, 2024 meeting minutes. Those minutes start on page 5. Hopefully you've had a chance to look them over. If there's anything you see that is incorrect that needs to be changed, please let us know. If otherwise we are good, we would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the April 16th meeting.
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I will motion that we approve the minutes from last meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Do we have a second?
Sean Fitzsimons, 2A South. I second the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimons. Any other discussion or question regarding the minutes from the April 16th meeting? Hearing none, if you are in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Okay, thank you, everybody. That takes care of agenda item number 4. Agenda item number 5, announcements from the committee chair. We do have a couple here real quick. This is it for us for right now, at least. We're going to say happy summer to everybody once we get through today's meeting. Do enjoy your summer. We're going to go through a lot today, and I do ask that you consider it. Maybe sometime over the summer when you really need a break from the beach, take a look at some of these proposals again, figure out which ones you really like and what we want to bring forward. Our next meeting, and this will make some people angry probably, sorry. Our next meeting we're tentatively planning to have be on either August 27th or August the 28th. And we do plan for that to be an in-person meeting, and it will likely be in Reno. For those of you who are kind of new to our committees, and especially if you're down here in the South like I am, we take care of the flights. We'll handle all that information for you. But I do probably need to, between now and then, get some pertinent information so that we can book the flights, things like the full name on your ID, the address, the date of birth, that sort of thing. I'll reach out to you individually for that so that we do have that and we can book you on a flight. Those of you who may be coming in, as Mr. Baldwin might be from the east part of the state, we can make arrangements for hotel rooms for you for the night before or night of the meeting, whatever would help you get back and forth. We understand that's a real early time in the school year for everybody. Please understand the reason we need to have it then is we're going to come back together probably a week after that, where everything we decide on that August 27th and 28th meeting, and that's going to be, we're hitting the policies and procedures. This is what we're going to go with. This is what we want to push forward to the board. I'll bring that back to you in an official document looking form so that you can review it and make sure that what we have in that form and what we're going to take forward to the Board of Control in the September Board of Control meeting is exactly what this committee wants it to be. I want you to make sure that as we come together in that meeting and we hash out policies and procedures, that when I turn those back around, yes, this is exactly what we're going to do going forward. Because once we send that off to the board on the September board meeting, it's their decision to make whether or not to adopt these. What we hope happens, obviously, is we come up with something that the board is going to take a look at and say, yes, this is the direction we need to go, and approve it. Because if we need to start over again, let's just say we'd rather not do that. The other thing too, that I kind of want to mention in this is when we started the process of realignment, and Mr. Paul Anderson and I had a little bit of a discussion on this recently. It was not meant to have 800 rules for 800 sports. And that's a little bit of an exaggeration. I get that. We want to have a process that is maybe as, for lack of a better term, simplified, easy to understand as possible. I say that knowing that I created a rubric that very few people understood when it was created. But we need to try to streamline as much as we possibly can in this so that people understand it. We have rules that we can follow and that we kind of color within the lines, so to speak, on something like this. I'm not saying by any means that we don't have flexibility. We need to have some flexibility in that, but to have different rules for every different sport. I don't think that was really what the board ever intended, and I don't want to speak for the board. But we try to need to stay as close to the lines here as we possibly can. If we need to make changes, we need to make changes. Before I talk myself into a hole, the other thing is, again, like any other meeting we have, we do want to follow Robert's Rules of Order. We are under the open meeting law here, but we are virtual, and we do understand that. And if you have something you want to say, something you want to add to a discussion, I am not at all going to be offended if you step on me. So please feel free to just let me know that you got something you want to say and go ahead into the discussion. Okay. That closes item number 5. Let's move on to item number 6, which is our public comment. This time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the committee about any matter not listed on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until notice procedures of the open meeting law have been met. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, it is asked that said person complete a public comment card and submit it to a committee member prior to the opening of this item. A limit of 3 minutes per person and/or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a group may be imposed. It's requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments that are deemed to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. We do have one public comment that I'm aware of that'll be a live public comment in our office. Mr. Janung from Elko, the assistant principal over athletics there, is with us. I'm not sure what you want to speak about. You do have a public comment though, and you do have 3 minutes. I'm going to open the floor up to you, sir. And whenever you are ready, please do begin.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Davis, members of the Realignment Committee. My name is Joe Janung, for the record, at Elko High School, assistant principal, serving in part in capacity with student activities and athletics. I come to you as an individual citizen today, and a firm believer in the power of extracurricular activities as a predictor of success after high school. I know you're building consensus, and I'm urging you on a couple considerations as you build consensus. So this will probably reaffirm most of your beliefs, but I wanted to bring to light, as we're building policies and procedures towards realignment and placing of teams. The first thought I had that I'd like to share is related to, I call population density, and that's geography, location, and travel distance. Now, travel distance is especially important considering, in my opinion, inflation is real. There are economic pressures across school educational systems, which will undoubtedly have impact on our student activities and athletics. So these policies and procedures need to plan holistically for those kind of avenues to provide the best service for a kid. The second thought is related to school size. Now, this has been a common denominator in realignment considerations. Clearly, the size of the school could increase the volume of your participants, which gives you a chance, at least initially, to be successful. But we also have to consider the fact that there could be specialty schools that impact their success rate right away. And that goes hand in hand with the competitive balance as you're considering these considerations, excuse me, to be redundant, competitive balance. And maybe because the nature of high school sports is cyclical and groups do change pretty fast, build a model where teams are moving maybe by sport or by school fairly quickly to adapt to the changes in environment and, as I mentioned, the aforementioned economic pressures that lead to a transient environment. The final statement I guess I would ask is from a person involved in athletics at the administrative level, please provide, when you do develop your policies and procedures, please provide the applicable data to all our member institutions so that as we build towards this idea of realigning teams and placing them into leagues, we could develop a holistic approach so as it isn't just shotgun here and there, but we're developing a unified approach to developing systems that impact our kids. So thank you. I appreciate your time, and those are my comments.
Thank you very much, sir. We appreciate you being here. Is there any other live public comment at any of our locations here around the state or anywhere in the universe that we happen to be at the moment for all our committee? Ms. Lutz, I know you are in our office in Sparks right now. Is there anybody else in our office in Sparks with public comment?
No, there is not.
And I don't believe either you or I have received any email public comment. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. With that, we'll close item number 6 and move on to item number 7 on our agenda, which is a discussion of the NAAQS guiding the realignment process. The NAAQS, of course, the Nevada Administrative Codes. This is for discussion only. This the NACs that guide our realignment process start on page 10 of the packet that was sent to our committee. And I would, at this point, like to turn things over to Paul Anderson, our legal counsel on this. He's explained to us already kind of the process of how we go about having the NAAQS, how we go about changing the NAAQS. And this committee will remember in our last meeting, we proposed something to go forward to the board as a change in the Nevada Administrative Code regarding the number of teams needed for a championship and a classification. So we've been through a little bit of this process, but we also know we don't want to change 100 NAAQS here. This is something that goes through the Legislative Council Bureau, goes through a lot of our legislators, and it's an arduous process. And Mr. Anderson, I don't want to speak on top of you. I'm going to turn things over to you here, but if you could kind of help guide us in this item with the importance of what we've done in the past and how it needs to be applied going forward.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Bart. Yeah, I've talked about this in past meetings with all of you. You know, and as I was getting ready for this meeting and was looking at all the various different proposals that were coming in based upon all the different sports that we have, I began to ask myself, you know, why is it that we have to have a separate approach to regional and state championships just because we have different sports? The significance of the amendments that we recently just had added or made to the NACs that govern the NIAA are in the packet, and that was a significant change to the prior realignment regulations that were in place. And I think I've explained to all of you before, we've been proceeding with realignment under a 2-year cycle, basically, you know, without this regulation in place, but with this concept in place for the last couple of go rounds with realignment, and now we finally have the reg in place. But what I'm seeing in terms of all these various proposals, and I'm not criticizing them or anything, but we're getting outside of, as Bart mentioned earlier, the lines in terms of what we have to color with. And so I would suggest to everybody on this committee, with respect to these proposals that are being brought forth, is looking at them from the standpoint as to whether or not the proposal being made falls within the newly revised NACs that we have for realignment. And if we try to stay within those lines, as Bart mentioned a moment ago, you know, changing anything now, it took us forever to get this particular regulation in place, and coming back to the legislature right away to amend it again, in my opinion, is not going to be looked on favorably. So those are the comments I have. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any.
I'll open it up to questions. I have one myself, Mr. Anderson, though, if you would like to maybe address this too. When we talk about, and we've done this, right? Before, as you mentioned, we were kind of going on a 2-year cycle when the NAC didn't really have spelled out a 2-year cycle for a while. We open ourselves up to some really potential big problems if we don't follow the NAC, correct, sir?
Well, correct, because I mean, anybody could raise an issue or file a lawsuit just saying you're not following your own rules. You know, and your own regulations. So it's spelled out for us now in the revised regulation that we have in place. It's part of the packet. And that's why I say we need to stay within those guidelines, or within that regulation.
Mr. Larson, you have a question, sir.
Yeah, of all the, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at any of the proposals, but are there any proposals out there right now that would basically need to be thrown out because of they don't fit?
I'm not suggesting any in particular. I'm just saying it seems to me that what this committee's being hit with, either by, outside individuals who may not be on the committee, but have an interest in a particular sport or in a particular region as to how they'd like to run whatever the sport happens to be. I think what the committee needs to do is look at all proposals to ensure that they encompass the entire state, not just, I'll just pick one out of the air, and I'm not criticizing it or anything, but not just track and field for the Las Vegas area schools. We need to look at it from the standpoint of how are we realigning with respect to that particular sport or any sport with respect to the entire state and within the guidelines of NAC 385B250, which is the regulation. So that's all I'm saying. We need to stop looking at it from the standpoint of how best can I line up my school or my region, against everybody else, and look at it from the good of the state. I mean, I mentioned to Bart before we got going here, other than football with the last realignment where, I'm not criticizing it, but I think it got a little bit out of hand when we had 6 or 7 different classifications for football championships. If you take that out, my question is, what was so bad about the realignment the last 2 years? I don't think it was all that bad, and I think it was fairly competitive and everything else. So why are we trying to reinvent the wheel and go into some other situations here that tend to maybe get outside of what we're trying to do or what the regulations will allow the committee to do? And then my final comment would be this. I mean, we've been going on and on and on about timeline, policies, and procedures. Really what you're trying to set up here is the rules that are going to apply to the realignment once we start realigning, which will be in the fall. And once the fall sports are over, we'll realign those based on rubric and various other considerations. But right now, the committee needs to put into place the rules and regulations that are going to apply once the realignment starts to happen in the fall. And because of that, I think you need to have something that's simplified and within the confines of the regulation.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, Bart,
Regarding-
Bob Pitt, 5A North, 5A,
Yeah.
4A North. Just a comment. Thank you, Paul, for that. Because I was noticing as well in the proposals that are coming out, they seem to be focused, and they're generated from the South. Understandably, those would be focused more on the South, but I noticed the same thing. They aren't statewide proposals. They are realignment proposals that I think, with the exception of football, are almost exclusive to just the South regions. I think one of the things that gets lost along the lines of what Paul's saying is that we have a regulation on realignment, and the number one factor that's considered first is enrollment numbers. And I think we lose sight of that at times, that's what we look at first, because so many of these proposals that we're seeing are referring to enrollment. So, and going back to enrollment. So Paul, my question for you, because what I'm hearing clearly is that we don't want to go back to changing NAC right now. Is it reasonable, with the fact that it seems like there's a lot of appetite out there to look at enrollment, to consider where those enrollment cuts are and possibly looking at it from that perspective? Or is that something we should steer away from as well?
Are you talking in terms, Bob, of changing the numbers?
Is that something, because that seems to be some of the things that are in the proposals?
Yeah, I mean, again, if we change anything, that's going to require action through the legislative commission, which can take at least a year, and we're coming into a legislative session after July 1st. The LCV is going to be concentrating on the legislative session that's going to be coming up in the winter, and they're not going to be paying a lot of attention to agencies like the NIAA that are trying to change their regulations. So I would steer away from changing the numbers. I think you can work with numbers, and you're correct. Under the regulation, the realignment regulation, the presumption, and it says it right in the regulation is written. So the presumption of where a school should be is based on those enrollment numbers. And then the rest of the regulation, or much of the rest of the regulation, talks about how, you can overcome that presumption based upon certain things such as geographical location, the rubric, numbers, and things like that. But we begin, as you say, with numbers, with student enrollment numbers.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other comments, other questions? Mr. Anderson, anything else you want to add here?
No, and I'm happy to answer questions, and I don't want to sound, I hope people don't feel that I'm being critical. I'm not. I just want to keep us on track and, going forward. I'm not criticizing. I'm glad people are looking at, different ways of doing these things, but let's try to keep it, within the reg. So.
Mr. Larson.
Yeah, Dallas Larson, 3A South. Paul, I know the other big one that's coming from the 3A has been about the private charter public schools and different things. I'm assuming that would pretty much be out of the regs or NACs as well. So,
yeah, to the extent we're talking about putting private schools and charter schools into their own classification, is that what you're talking about, Dallas?
Yes.
Yeah, that could be a recommendation, I think, that the realignment committee can make. But that's really going to require that's NIAA Board of Control action. And that's a major change. If we start saying, hey, we're going to have a whole new classification or a state championship based on the fact that we've got private and or charter or a combination of the two, and they're going to be on their own, and then we'll have the other state championships as we've had in the past. So that would be a major change to what we do, and something that I think needs to be made by the Board of Control.
And then my last one would just is the rubric, how the rubric's made. I'm assuming that's also the way the rubric works. If we tweak the rubric, is that going to be a big change, or would that require also?
That's a great question. That really is a good question, because that goes back to what I was saying, and that's a point that no, we don't have to change the reg. If we wanted to modify the rubric, you have the power to modify the rubric without making a change to the regulation. We set up the regulation as it's written now to allow that specifically for that purpose. So there's flexibility within what you can do here as a realignment committee, as long as you stay. That would be staying within the lines, I guess, to answer that question. I hope that makes sense.
We've included the rules of the rubric inside the policies and procedures in the past, which, if we make some changes to the policies and procedures, that, as Mr. Anderson said, keeps us within the lines. We can think of the rubric as a success factor. If we use a success factor, can the rubric be part of it? Can it be all of it? Sure. That's all part of things that we can decide in policies and procedures. Mr. Cole, you have your hand up.
Thank you, Bart. Member Cole, for the record. Attorney Anderson, really, ultimately, though, everything that we're doing is making recommendations, correct?
Yeah, everything this group does, you vote on things as a group, as a committee, and the decisions that are made in terms of those votes go to the Board of Control as recommendations to them, which the Board of Control ultimately approve or disapprove.
Yeah, and then some of the other things that you mentioned, like that we're coming into a legislative session, I follow that stuff very closely. If there were things that like the Board of Control wanted, or some of those other things that maybe would take more time, when would the appropriate time for discussions of things be more appropriate to take to the Legislative Bureau Council, if those were the kind of things that needed to be done? If changes in the NAC really needed to be done, when's the appropriate time for those kind of discussions to happen then?
So the way that's always worked is once, the legislature meets in odd years, beginning in February and continuing through the early part of June. It's a 120-day session. Once the session's over in June of, it'll be 2025 this time. Within a couple of months, they usually have all their bills written and they're on the books and done. And the LCB is, I say, open for business again in terms of working on regulations for agencies, administrative agencies such as the NIAA. So that's when we try to push things through, because they tend to have more time and able to dedicate more manpower to what we're doing.
Makes sense. Because one of the things I thought we went to this timeline kind of was to be more aligned, but really then we kind of went unintentionally away from being able to make some of those kind of changes. So we need to keep that kind of stuff in mind. If we want to make, if we really felt like, hey, there needs to be more classes, or we need to do some of those kind of things, we need to keep those recommendations in mind for even number of years, is what I hear you saying.
Yeah, and really, I mean, the committee can make those recommendations, I think, now, to the Board of Control, because it's the Board of Control that only they can make proposals and adopt proposals to change regulations. But if that's what the Realignment Committee feels needs to occur, those recommendations can be made now, and would go before the board at the most likely at the September meeting, the fall meeting, and we can begin working on a regulation then. By the time we would get through the preliminary steps, we'd be into that time frame or close to it, where the LCB would be freed up and able to begin taking action with us or for us.
Perfect. Thank you. That helps a lot. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And keep in mind, everybody, this one's a 3-year cycle coming up, and it was done so that we can kind of get away from some of the troubles that were caused when we had to switch up cycles during the pandemic, and how it kind of folded into certain schedules when it came to legislators in Nevada as well. So yes, if you do have ideas going forward, we're not saying never change the NAC again. That's not what we're saying by any means. We just, when it takes the amount of work it takes to change something in the NAC, we don't want to be changing it constantly, is the biggest thing there. Any other comments or questions here on item number 7 about the NAC's guiding our realignment process?
Bart, I just had a follow-up to what you're saying there. What we're really saying is, hey, look, you know what? We've got this, the NAC is in place right now. So for this realignment, and what this committee is going to do, we need to stay within that. If you have recommendations to change it, those can be considered and begun, but that's probably for the next realignment committee. In terms of getting those into place where those would become relevant then.
Thank you. And I will tell you on behalf of everybody here in this committee, right? They've put me in a position to committee chair. It's my job, whatever this committee decides, whatever at the end, whatever you recommend going forward, whatever that may be, it's my job to take it forward to the Board of Control. We've got some other people in this meeting who are also liaisons to our board. We have someone in this meeting who is soon to be the executive director of the association. We can all take that forward to the board. It's our job to represent what you decide. What the board decides with that is what the board decides with that. Obviously can't vote for them, can't shape the vote. But if we stick to what we've got for our rules right now, it might be easier to get that through. Again, I don't want to speak for the voting members of the board. It's ultimately their decision. But that's it. It's their decision when we get done. Whatever this committee decides, we're going to bring it forward and we're going to tell the board, this is what the committee decided, this is why. And I will fight for whatever that happens to be. But again, as Mr. Anderson so well put it, we've got the NACs in place. We can't just change them, as though we were making a phone call and say, please change this. Anything else for item number 7? Okay, let's move on to item number 8, with the review of the submitted realignment proposals. We have some people with us in the meeting who are bringing their proposals forward. This is why I kind of want to go out of order here, because some of these are newer to us, and I want to give the people bringing them forward the opportunity to present them. If you would skip ahead to pages 32 through 43 in your packet. The first one we'll do is what is watermarked proposal number 2. This is the proposal coming forward from the Southern Nevada Football Coaches Association. And Rich Morocco, the head coach at Liberty, also the athletic director at Liberty High School, is here. He was in our last meeting. They had kind of worked it down to 3 proposals. This is the one that they're bringing forward. Coach, I can either continue sharing this on my screen, or if you would rather share yours to jump around, you tell me what you'd prefer here.
You can share yours, that's fine.
Okay, if you're ready, sir, please go ahead with whatever you'd like to present, and then we'll follow up with any questions from our committee.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for having me on. I'll try to hopefully make this as easy to understand and take any questions that you might have about this. I do feel that this proposal that we're putting forward here could be used for every sport. Obviously we looked at it from a football perspective, and I didn't go through and do all of the analysis for every sport and where people would fall and how many teams might be in each of the different classifications. But essentially one of the big concerns that we had is, well, let me start off by saying, first, this is not a unanimous proposal from the Southern Nevada Football Coaches Association. I think anytime that you're dealing with realignment, you're not going to make everybody happy. Not everyone's going to be 100% behind things, but this was 75 or 80% of the coaches ultimately agreed that this should be the one that we put forth. And I think it's important, and I know you guys have a tough job, that we need to look at a proposal that is what's best for the sports and not what's best for individual schools in that moment. Some schools or some teams can be good in the moment because of coaching, because of they're on kind of a roll, and then they want to change where they fall in the process and not really do what's best for the overall sport. So that was kind of my take on things with our coaches, is we need to do something that's best for the sport. And we didn't feel that the current football realignment was what was best for the sport. And that is your top classification of teams being only 7 teams playing 6 games against the same 6 teams in the playoffs and in the regular season. So this proposal kind of addresses that issue. It basically separates everybody into 5A, 4A, 3A, 2A, and 1A. And then we put in some enrollment pieces to this because of 3A and also the larger schools in the 5A. We felt like, if you're over a certain population, then you don't really have barriers to success like some other schools might have that have way less enrollment. And so I included the projected numbers for this upcoming school year for each high school so that you guys could see, instead of people speculating like, oh, I think this school's sitting at this many kids, this was what came out for our projections down in CCSD. So if you could scroll back up for a second there, Bart.
Sure.
Yeah. So we basically said that if in the 5A, if your school has 3,000 or more projected enrollment, then you must stay in the 5A. You would not fall into any kind of relegation system. So that if you came in last place in the 5A and you had over 3,000 kids, you would still stay in the 5A. You wouldn't move down. You would not be eligible for relegation. In the 4A, we basically looked at the numbers, and kind of 2275 was the number that kind of made sense. So if you have less than 2275, you would be protected from being placed in the 5A. So there's 4 schools that fall into that category down in the south, and that's Bonanza, Cheyenne, El Dorado, and Silverado. And then schools with more than 2275 could never be relegated into the 3A. So that way, you know, a large 4A team that has a bad year in football could not be put down in the 3A competing with those teams. And then in the 3A league, again, I know we use the multiplier, and I know it gets a little tricky with the charter schools, and I didn't have all the charter school numbers, you know, and where people sit, but basically we said 1,300 would be the cap, and anyone that's under 1,300 would never have to be promoted up into 4A. And that would be Boulder City, which is 634, Virgin Valley 785, Moapa 574. And again, I don't have the northern numbers. I can only go through with, you know, what I had down in the south, but I did meet with the Northern Coaches Association a couple of times, and of the coaches that were there, they seem to be behind the proposal, and we did tweak our proposal based on some of the input that they gave. And I get it. There's completely different issues in Northern Nevada when it comes to especially travel and how spread out things are. And, you know, I don't want to sit here and say, as somebody from the South and who doesn't understand those issues, that you have to be in a certain classification, right? That could be worked out within this committee, or, you know, on the board level. So okay, now you can scroll down if you want to go past all the numbers here. Okay, so this is what it would look like based on our using that criteria above of enrollment and who is already in the 5A. So we looked at, like, if we were using the same, like this upcoming year with the relegation up and down, we looked at that, and that's how we placed these 5A, 4A, 3A teams. And then we also factored into the enrollment. So 20 teams in the 5A South. In the 5A North, we had it as 7 teams. And again, that was after input from the Northern Coaches Association. And then basically we would group them as best we could by division, by geography. And that is because, you know, in football, it's a revenue generating sport. You know, I think that's important to understand, because that revenue does get shared across, and schools get that money back in their budgets. And, you know, if you're having better attended games, it's good for everybody. So, you know, I've noticed just in the last few years that some of our league games are not very well attended, because, you know, our kids are just not going to travel all the way across the city, especially when you have a 6 o'clock game time now, and you have to go across the, you know, Las Vegas in rush hour, and parents aren't going to let their kids drive, you know, from Liberty to Arborview necessarily on a, you know, for a league game. So this was, again, this is just a recommendation. It could be manipulated and put any way you guys want, really, but it made sense. Arborview, Palo, Shadow, Legacy, Centennial in a division. They're all relatively close to each other. Gorman, Faith, Sierra Vista, Clark, and Durango. Liberty, Desert Oasis, Foothill, Green Valley, Coronado, and then Basic, Canyon, Vegas, Desert Pines, and Sunrise Mountain. And you would play out your regular season, and then you would have the playoffs. And the one thing that's unique with this, which again I know might be, I don't know how it would work with the NIAA and creating playoffs and things, but essentially, instead of just predetermining the top 7 teams and saying you guys are going to go play in a league together and then you guys are going to play for the top championship, which is what the 5A1 has done, we say let's play out the regular season and determine who the best 8 teams are at the end of the season. And so we call it the open playoffs, where you have 8 teams compete for the open championship. And again, we're not set in stone on how we determine those 8 teams. It could be max preps, it could be some other rubric system that we create or is already out there. And I talked to Bart already a little bit about this. Max preps is an easy way because they've been doing it for years, and it's pretty accurate. But based on the example of 2023, if we would have had this in place, the top 8 teams would have been Gorman, Liberty, Shadow, Minogue, Arborview, Coronado, Desert Pines, and Faith. And then those teams would play ultimately for a state championship. The rest of the 5A teams would then be in the 5A Southern playoffs. We'd take 8 teams. Not everyone would make the playoffs, just 8. We don't like that everyone makes the playoffs. Nothing's worse than you have a terrible season and you're 0-7 in your division, and then you got to go play the number 1 team, Gorman or Liberty, in the first round, and it's not what people want. So make it a little more important, make the importance of making the playoffs more valuable. So 8 playoff teams. The North would have 6 in this situation because Minogue would have been in the open, and then they play out the playoffs, and then you'd have a 5A state champion. So you'd end up with 2 5A champions opposed to 3 that we have now. And go ahead and scroll to the next page there, Bart. 4A, and again, this is something we said, either 16 to 18 teams in the 4A South. And the reason we said that was based on how we wanted to handle the 3A. If we wanted to give a couple more teams to the 3A, we could. And again, using the enrollment numbers and the protected things, I kind of color coded it here. So Cheyenne, El Dorado, Bonanza, and Silverado were those protected teams. The green teams are the charter school teams that are in there. And then you'd mix in the public school teams. So the 4A would look kind of like I have it written there. Or if you wanted to do 16 teams, basically you would just take, I can't remember, just looking at it real quick. I think it was like El Dorado and maybe Bonanza, and we put them down into the 3A to give the 3A a couple more teams. The 4A North would again have 6 teams. This would give the northern teams a chance to compete for a 4H championship, which when talking to the northern coaches, they like that. They wanted that to have a true state championship in the 4A and not have it just a southern champion thing. And again, playoffs, top 8 from the north or from the south. Everyone from the north could make it. And you'd play it out till a 4A state champion is crowned. And then the 3A, so again, if you didn't have if you had an 18-team 4A league, you would only have basically a 5-team 3A South. So maybe going 16 teams would be better. So that way there could be 7 Southern teams in the 3A. With the Meadows potentially being an 8th team, I know that they wanted to appeal going into the 3A, so we didn't include them into this proposal. And then the 3A North would be 8 teams in the 3A North. So that's probably the closest classification. And then as far as the 2A and the 1A, we would essentially keep it the same as it's been. And just kind of go, they're completely different kind of beast in the lower classifications. So I also included in the proposal, just so you could kind of see, a little bit of history over the last 5 years, really 4 seasons, because COVID wiped out the 1 year, of where schools would have been placed in the Max Preps rankings. And I know that there's a little controversy or questionable rankings when sometimes a 3A school is ranked in the top 10. They obviously would not be put into the 5A top 8 teams. They would just kind of we'd just pass them up and go to the next team on the list. So that's, I know it's a lot of information there, but again, I do think that this proposal works well. It could be used in every single sport. If we're being honest, for us, especially in football, the elephant in the room is Bishop Gorman, and it's, most of the time you could pretty much predetermine, okay, Gorman's going to win the state championship in football, and then people don't want to be, in a league with them, or they don't want to be in the playoffs with them. And, if we're not going to address that inequity with the private schools and the public schools, then I think this is the next most fair proposal that we were able to come up with. So again, it's not every single team is behind this. Not every single school is behind this. Some teams, they like where they're at. They like being in the lower classification. They don't want to move up into the 5A, or they don't want to be in Gorman's division, or they don't want to be, in Liberty's division. But, I do feel that, you're not going to make everybody happy, and you have to look at what's best for the sport. And I don't know if everybody realizes this, but in Southern Nevada football, there's 23 new coaches in the last 2 years. 13 or 22, new coaches in the last 2 years. 13 this year, new football coaches. And, everybody obviously is going to come in and have their own opinion on things. And sometimes people don't have the history of what's happening. And, hopefully you guys will do what's best for everybody and not, look in the short-term window. That's it.
Coach, thank you for being here. I'm going to keep you around for just a couple moments, though, if you wouldn't mind staying
Sure.
with us, just for questions, comments. Mr. Larson, you've got your hand up already. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Dallas Starsman, 3A South. Hey, Coach, maybe just a little oversight with Pahrump being right at that 1,300. I would assume under this, if they are in the 4A, they would be one of those protected schools as well.
Yeah, if they're at the 1,300, then they would be in that protected mode.
Okay, and then I know traditionally the 3A North and South both prefer to have like a 6 teams make the playoffs instead of 8. That wouldn't change this at all, would it, Coach?
No, we could do anything you want on that stuff.
Okay.
Again, I don't like everybody making the playoffs, but 8 is easier. But yeah, if each league wants to have whatever their magic number is for playoffs, that's great.
And then I'm kind of curious with the geography. Maybe Tim would have an answer to this one. Does that help with the transportation issues we have in the South? Is if we have more geographically related leagues, does that help with all these transportation issues?
Spoken like a man who lives way out in the in the hinterlands, as a friend of ours would like to say. Dallas, I will tell you that with the accommodations and the scheduling changes that we've made in the South, basically for anyone who's not aware, Southern Nevada has gone to football only on Friday night for league games, with no transportation promises for CCSD for any other sport. That kind of has alleviated a little of that stress. Because at the end of the day, when you're moving Liberty football, you're still moving a lot of kids, a lot of distance, and usually the bus is coming from the yard closest to them. So where they're going is where they're going. The shuttling of teams is not nearly as intricate as it is in other sports on other nights. So I would say while it might help, I don't think it's a mitigating factor that we would have to really say would drive the realignment in any way, shape, or form. I think Rich has hit on a very interesting factor, though, is I do see the drop in attendance at games as the ones I've attended in the 5A due to the distance for the kids. And going back to more geographic locations may impact that a little better and drive up his attendance. But I will tell you, the transportation should not be a factor that they would need to worry about in that sense.
But I'm thinking more, not just football, Tim. I'm talking about if we did a geography, since we're thinking more of everything, if this was for every sport more geographically located.
I think the dance would be a little neater. How's that?
Okay.
You wouldn't change partners as much. I think the yards would be a little more conducive because the yards are in the strategically located sections of town. I think maybe for basketball and soccer, when they start shuttling as much as they do, perhaps Dallas. But again, I don't think that should be the driving factor for realignment. I just think I'm glad you're cognizant of it. For those of you that aren't aware, when Moapa travels, Moapa's bus is their bus. That's the end of it. We don't get to shuttle, where Liberty's volleyball team may be the first route of a 3-route cycle for the night, and keeping them in that geographic region may be better, but I'm not sure how that would make a huge difference at this point.
Mr. Kofer, you have your hand up, sir.
So I have a clarification, and I got a question for Rich. So I want to clarify the 3A, 4A movement there, because I think the 1300 number is the 3A mark, 3A to 4A mark. The movement, what this proposal does add is teams or schools that would be over 900 or 900 plus, that 900 to 1300 range, they would be eligible for advancement. Anybody under 900 could not be forced to advance. So this now includes, 3A being part of the advancement relegation cycle. So, because I know Pahrump was mentioned there, Pahrump, if they're over 1300, then that puts them in 4A, based on appeal and all that. To support the 3A, they could go down when necessary. But a team that's under 900 or a school that's under 900 could not be forced to go into 4A on an advancement cycle. So it kind of keeps that, layered pattern through that. And then I had a question for Rich, because your breakdown on this proposal is with regards to the North. I know he had received like a pseudo, idea from Northern football about some of their movement in reclassifying, how they did it. But I don't know that was in line with what I'm seeing in this one. Rich, did the discussion revert back with Northern football to know these are what we want, or are these just the old outlays from before? Because we had seen something where, Truckee was 4A, Elko was 4A, and then there were some other movements in there. So I was kind of asking Rich how much discussion or how much support or, interest from the North was in this proposal.
Yeah, so when that proposal came out, I met with them, we talked, and when I say them, it was, and forgive me that I don't remember everybody's name from up there, but it was the president of the Northern Nevada Football Coach Association, who's from Spanish Springs, I believe. And, the problem for them was certain schools, like say a Truckee, I think Elko is one of them, where they wanted to move them up into the 4A, and some teams were jumping up into the 5A under their proposal. And so when I shared them this, at least the teams, again, I think there was 16 teams maybe that were in our meeting, and that's our proposal. Originally had more than, we had 10 5A teams from the North, and they guided me into, well, no, we should keep these 7 in the 5A, and then these are the teams that should be in the 4A, and then these are the teams that are in the 3A. But it wasn't something that was necessarily voted on by them, and then them saying, yeah, we like this, let's go with this.
Any comments from our northern people here? Mr. Levitt, Mr. Anderson, Mr. Bell, Mr. Holbrook, kind of looking at you guys in particular here. When we look at that open division, that the example here proposed by Mr. Morocco, it had Bishop Minogue as one team in an 8-team playoff, where maybe Minogue's 4, maybe Minogue's 5, maybe it's Spanish Springs in there. That could cause some potential travel concerns for playoffs. I would think too, if there's just one northern team and they get spotted in a 6-7 seed, where maybe they would have to make 3 trips south. I don't know. I'm not saying it's a concern, just would like feedback from the northern people on this as well. If anybody's willing to jump in.
Hey Bart, this is Art Anderson, 4A, 5A North represent member. I think what you just brought up right there, and Coach, I've talked to Coach Hummel from Spanish Springs. He is the president of the Northern Coaches Association. He likes this proposal. That is, as I expressed to him, a major concern is if a Washoe County school gets put into that upper open playoff. I have not confirmed that we will have help with transportation or anything like that. I'm not sure if it's Clark. I would assume it's Clark County that helps with the transportation costs for playoffs for the southern teams, if vice versa, if a southern team is coming up to the north. So that would just be right now one possible obstacle to the playoff system, not necessarily how the teams are aligned.
Can I say something, Bart?
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, and that would obviously be a concern if you add the North into the 4A, right? Because then they'd have another travel when it comes to the state championship, whereas now you don't have that. And I did think about that too, like you don't want to have a 6 seed necessarily have to travel 3 weeks in a row, but the chances of that happening, of an 8 seed that plays Bishop Gorman week 1 having to come back and play the next week because they upset them, I think you'd take that, and probably pay double the buses if that were able to happen. But
any other comments from our committee regarding Mr. Morocco and the Southern Nevada Football Coaches Association proposal?
Yeah, Bob Levitt.
Yeah.
Commissioner 4A, 5A North. I'm pleased that the Southern Nevada coaches have included these Northern Nevada coaches. Unfortunately, I know Art, it sounds like he's talked to Coach Hummel, but we just met last week with all the athletic directors and we heard nothing about any conversation with any of the coaches up here and the possible proposal. And so we don't, as athletic directors, really understand where the coaches are standing. It sounds like they gave Coach Morocco some input, and we appreciate that. And thanks, Coach, for that. Coach, I had a question regarding, and I know you kind of left it open on what would be used to determine that those 8 teams that qualified for the Open. And I've always thought Max Preps, wow, that makes a lot of sense. I follow the rankings. I look at those rankings, and then this year I was following baseball rankings and Reno High School baseball, for instance, who had a pretty successful year. They only had a few losses. And during regionals, they were the undefeated team going into the final Saturday. They did lose the first game, had to play the if game, won the if game to win the Northern Regional title, which is all well and good for Reno High School. But with respect to Max Preps, their ranking that week went down. So I don't understand that ranking. I don't understand. I've never looked into how Max Preps works, but that would be a concern of mine if there's potential, if it works in a way that somebody can be really successful that week. Yeah, they had a hiccup in that first game in the championship Saturday, but they still won a regional title and the ranking went down. So I would be concerned about that. So, but I like the sounds of it, and I think it would be real receptive or well received by the athletic directors up here. I'm interested, I just find and Art, I don't know if you agree with me or disagree, but when I look at the list of schools in the 4A and I kind of look at that and I'm going, okay, then I look at the schools in the 3A and I'm seeing Elko and I'm seeing Churchill County and Fernley and Truckee, and I'm going, wow, that 3A looks like a lot tougher league than that 4A looks, just based on past performance. So I guess I'm a little bit more interested in what the coaches had to say, or I don't know, Art, do you agree, disagree? I'm a little bit thrown by those schools I see as Sparks, and no disrespect to any of the schools that are listed on the 4A, but my sense is there's schools there that have a difficult time even competing with those schools some of the schools in the 3A.
Yeah, in the South, the 3A is better than the 4A.
Okay.
The 4A is more. I don't want to. Again, I'm not trying to be disrespectful to anybody, but
understood. Yeah, sure.
More the inner city schools that are struggling to field full programs. And it's definitely, there could be arguments made that Slam or Moapa Valley would win the 4A championship, like once it's settled down, and everybody's placed correctly.
Sure. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr.
And
Control,
as far as the max preps goes, their ranking's not perfect because they look at national strength of schedule. And so, like, for example, like Gorman and Liberty, we play a lot of not just national games, but top 20 ranked teams in the country. So a loss to a top 20 ranked team in the country is going to get us jumped up more than beating the 17,000th ranked team that's in Nevada somewhere, right? So that is kind of the flaw in their system, and that's why I'm leaving it open to. I'm not saying it has to be max preps. We could come up with any way to determine it. You could have a committee of people that look at it holistically and say these are the 8 teams that should be up. You could do. I know Bart has another rubric thing that could possibly determine the top 8 teams, at that too. So
thank you. Appreciate it.
Mr. Anderson, you were going to jump in, I think, real quick there, sir.
Yeah, just real quick, agreeing with what Bob and Coach Morocco are saying, is the northern proposal that we started off with this realignment committee, we were getting some pushback from those traditional 3A schools about moving up into the 4A or possibly a team going as high as the 5A. So I think that's kind of why the northern coaches are now aligning with this proposal.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Cottrell, I know you get your hand up. I'm going to jump in just real quick, sir, if you don't mind holding on for just a second. In regards to the max preps rankings and any ranking, there's going to be a flaw in whatever system you come up with. It's just going to be that way. It's math, and math does not work well to people all the time. So whatever system you've got, you can find the flaw no matter whether you want to look for one or not. The other part of that is max preps is a little bit susceptible, right? Because you're taking scores from whoever's willing to put them in. And there have been times when a game's been put in twice, or somebody somewhere is trying to get a rise out of somebody and puts in, whatever school from Arizona beating Bishop Gorman 92-0 on a certain night. And that we know it didn't happen. Their ranking, and I've talked with Elisa Dancer, who was our max preps representative for our state. They try to police it as well as they can. They just don't have the people to do it. Eventually, things do generally get worked out. But again, is their ranking perfect? No. Is the rubric perfect? No. Finding something that would best fit everybody, that would be a goal for sure. Mr. Cottrell, please go ahead, sir.
Rob Cottrell, 3A North president, and also a longtime 3A North football coach. I know the feeling that I'm getting from our athletic directors here in the North is they would like to keep the 3A, somewhat pretty much intact with the rural schools and all that. And that's why you don't want to see that movement up into a 4A, I believe. That's just how our feeling is right now, or the general consensus. And I do agree with what Mr. Levitt said, that no disrespect to anyone, but the 3A league is probably more difficult when it comes to football. And then one more quick note on the rankings. I don't know if Coach Morocco, you've ever seen Cal Prep's rankings and how associated that is with Max Preps or not, but I know the Cal Preps rankings are scary accurate sometimes. So I just wanted to add my 2 cents on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Coach Morocco, or Coach Morocco, any other comments from you?
I'm good. Thanks, Bart, for having me on.
Yeah, Mr. Cole, you've got your hand up.
I think one of the cool things about the proposal and having, whether it's Max Preps or any of the ranking systems, is at least it kind of allows teams, whether it's football or whatever it is, to have kind of an idea throughout the season where they're sitting as we start to look at a playoff system. And I think that's where I think this type of proposal maybe is good compared to some of the later seeding systems that we've talked about. I think it's good for coaches. I think it's good for fans. I think it's good for players when we kind of have something that we're looking for, right? We already have somebody that's a 1 seed, somebody that's already an 8 seed or a 12 seed or whatever it is. So you kind of know, hey, this is who we potentially would be playing, so that you already kind of have something knowing, hey, we might have to travel here, we might have to travel there, we might host a home game, we might do all these kinds of things. There's already something kind of already in place, those types of things. It doesn't matter whether there's a panel or there's something already putting those seedings out, but I think at least that, in my mind, has kind of something in place where there's a seeding opportunity already, where fans can kind of get excited about it, coaches can get excited about it, players kind of know already where they sit compared to other teams and those kinds of things. So I appreciate Coach, you at least bringing something to the table. You brought something before, you went back, you've looked at it, you've done homework, you've looked at projections, you've done all those kinds of things. You've collaborated with the North, you went up and talked to them and those types of things. I appreciate you doing that. I appreciate you coming back to us and looking to better the sport, better the realignment opportunities for the entire state, not just down here, what makes sense, but being a collaborative builder across the state to make at least football. And I think this is something that could go across multiple sports. Actually, I think it makes sense in a lot of ways. So I appreciate you doing that for us, Coach. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ditto. Thanks, Coach, from the North. Appreciate it.
Anything else for Coach Morocco? Coach, thank you for being here, for all the time that you've put into this, for everything that you've done for kids. We really appreciate it. If we end up going with this proposal down the road, we may be relying on you a lot more. But thank you for being here today.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Obviously, we skipped over proposal number 1. We're kind of going in different order here. The proposals that we've talked about already that have been presented, we can come back to and ask questions. I just don't want to spend a whole lot of time on those when we have new proposals here. When we've already hashed one out, let's see what else we've got. But as the flavor of this committee is to go back over some, we will. I'm going to move on to the next one. Proposal number 3, which is on pages 44 through 48 of your packet. This is coming to us from Mr. Joe Bedowitz, who is the athletic director and boys basketball coach at Sierra Vista High School. I believe I saw him log in. Coach Bedowitz, if you're here, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute and kind of give us an overview of your proposal.
Hey, how's everybody doing today? I don't want to take up a lot of your time because a lot of what is in my proposal was what Rich just went over as well. As I started this and I stated, it's not my intent to do the realignment committee's job. But I just felt that enough people reached out to me to try to put something together to stop some of the bad things that are happening. And I listened to the beginning of this meeting and agree with everything as to how everything is really just kind of splintered, that we have 17,000 different rubrics for every sport. And I believe Rich hit on that as well, is that we're really trying to pull things back together, get it streamlined, and hopefully create one rubric that governs all. And that's kind of, as I started this, I had basketball in mind, but as I started going through it, I realized that this could be used across the board. The only real difference between what Rich has said and what I have in mind is that part of my proposal is to save, I guess for a better lack of term, girls basketball. As the men's basketball coach and athletic director, I see it with my own eyes, the demise of girls basketball. Also get back and saying that.
Coach, if you can hear me, I was kind of hoping you'd get to a spot here where we could hear, but where you're getting a little bit choppy. I think you're driving around right now and probably don't have a real strong signal. I don't know if you can get to a place
I'm
where.
actually, let me find a different spot. I'm on my way over to coach some summer league games. Let me see if I can get to a place with a better signal. Give me one chance.
Yeah,
is this a little better? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Yeah, I just don't want you to stop in the middle of traffic or anything.
Yeah. No, we're good. I'm pulling underneath the shade tree, get myself a little shake. So I basically just kind of recap. Mine is very similar to Rich's, with the addition of I'm also trying to attempt to save girls basketball. I know that girls basketball has just been moving slowly downhill in terms of teams being able to put people on the court, in terms of getting fans to games. And I think that that's also something that along the same lines of using geographical area, but bringing these dual sports in the same seasons back together. Honestly, this last season, I played the same team as our girls team, but on different nights. We didn't have one game that was on the same night this season. And that's just, I think it's detrimental to girls basketball. And that needs to be fixed / saved. As far as the rest of this proposal, it really is very, very similar to Rich's proposal. The difference is that the open divisions are a large open division and a small open division, where basically you can see in the proposal that we're putting everybody back together. And Rich did a much better job of putting the populations with schools. I didn't have that information readily available to me. So the list that I put together could conceivably be changed. But again, that's the realignment committee's job, not mine. I'm just trying to put in some guidelines to a place where the most competitive playoff picture is available to us. And in the current system, a lot of times that's not the case, because we're basing placement on past history, not on what they've done this year. And that open division that everybody is terminology using does that. It puts emphasis on what have you done this year. The only other thing that I would say with his proposal and my proposal is that the difference is that I would like that if we are going this route and we are using max preps or any strength of schedule model, that no events be used outside of the state of Nevada, so that if Liberty is going to California to play a game, that does not mix in with their strength of schedule component of the rubric or whatever system that you have in place.
Thank you, Coach. Any questions, any comments for Coach Bedowitz regarding his proposal? It's again on pages 44 through 48 of the packet today. Coach Larson, Dallas Larson from WAPA.
Yeah, so just it does look very similar to what the football just provided to us. I mean, right? This looks like two proposals we could kind of work out to where it looks we could have on the same page at some point, right?
Yes, absolutely. And again, like I said, when I first started building it, I had basketball in mind, but as I kind of dove deeper into it, I do think it's something that we can kind of mold and put into whatever shape we need it to basically use it across the board so that we are not as splintered as we have been in the past few years.
I got a question for Joe.
Yeah, please, Mr. Kofer,
Hey,
go ahead.
Mike Cooper, what would designate a large school from a small school on your large school, small school status? Where's that break
So-
at? Find that.
So basically, Arizona and both Arizona and California are using this model. Arizona is attempting to do this on a small school basis, and based on talking to them, I would have that breakdown as the 4A, 5A schools that exist right now would be large school, and then the 3A, 2A, 1A schools would be considered small schools. And that again, it's a population breakdown, and that's something that as y'all discussed in the beginning of the meeting, is something that the realignment committee needs to really drill down and figure out where that cutoff is and what that cutoff is.
Other questions for Mr. Bedowitz? Mr. Larson, get your hand up again.
Sorry, just, and how, is this something you've put, with other coaches, the Coach Association, or I'm just kind of curious what kind of.
The answer to that question is that I've sent it out to an array of coaches in different alignments. Right now, there really technically is no basketball coaches association. We don't really have regular meetings or anything like that. It's just we're just kind of talking to each other, and enough people had asked me to put something together to try to fix what's wrong with the current system in place. So the answer is no. The Coaches Association hasn't really agreed on things because there's not one. But like I said, I've sent it out to 1A, 2A, 3A, 4A, 5A. I've sent it to principals, and I've sent it to athletic directors as well.
And would you say, have you had a positive, feedback is what I guess I'm trying to, has it been pretty good?
Yeah, I've had pretty good feedback. Everybody is very excited and wants to have this open division where, like Rich said, those top schools are getting pushed up and out into their own division, and then everybody else is playing for their respective 4A, 3A, 2A, 1A state titles. That everybody still has a chance in there because they're not playing those schools that got pushed into the open division.
One question I have, Mr. Bedowitz, when we talk about the playoff breakdown here that I've put up on the screen now, I'm not sure if you can see it because you're in your car trying not to sweat in 100-degree weather. When we talk about a 24-team 4A state tournament bracket, are we just talking strictly South there? Are we talking about a mixture of North and South teams? Because again, that travel concern could come into play for the districts.
Right. And look, the travel is always a concern. I mean, it's a concern in every state. Eventually there are travel concerns, and we just have to face them and address them. It does include both North and South. To not include both is to basically be where we're at now, where one alignment, it does not have a true state championship. And that, I don't believe that's good. I don't believe that's what anybody wants. I believe everybody wants a real state championship at every alignment level. And again, unfortunately, we just have to face those problems as they come at us and deal with them the best we can.
Other questions for Mr. Bedowitz? Anything else, sir, that you'd like to add before we let you get back on your drive to your summer game that you got to go coach?
No, that's it. I appreciate the time, and good luck hashing this stuff out.
Hey, thank you so much for your proposal. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everything you're doing at Sierra Vista for all the kids as well, sir. Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep, that is proposal number 3. We have 2 more that have yet to be presented to our committee. I am not certain, and I'm going to have to come out of a screen share here to get to a different proposal. I'm not certain if Mr. Esslinger from El Dorado is here with us. If you are, sir, could you let us know that you're here? Okay, I do not hear him yet. That being said, I also don't want to just skip over his proposal because he didn't happen to be here. So You should be able to see it up on your screen now. This is what came to us. I'm not going to try to interpret it or present it for him. It is the proposal sent by El Dorado's athletic director. Does not seem to be sports specific at all. Again, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, so I'm not going to try to present somebody else's proposal. I would say, please do look at this. Hopefully we can get Mr. Esslinger to communicate to us any additional comments that he may have, any questions, any comments, anything on this one from our committee. And again, I don't mean to rush through this in any way. It's just without more of a description, I don't want to interpret anything incorrectly. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and take that one back off the screen, and we're going to move to proposal number 8, which was also a supplemental proposal, came after the packet had been put together. Tyrell Cooper, he has been forever and ever and ever our track and cross country go-to person, coordinator, jack of all trades, everything else in the state, for everything that he's done for those sports. I believe he was going to be here today, and I think he is here. Mr. Cooper, if you wouldn't mind joining us real quick, and I can either share my screen with that proposal, or I don't know if you would like to share yours instead, with whatever's easier for you, sir.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you guys all for having me today. And if you could share your screen, that'd be a lot easier. I don't know if mine's set up to share like that just yet.
Okay. Give me just a second. You'll have it up. Go ahead.
No problem. Thank you. You guys, I'm here to talk to you guys about the Southern Nevada track and field realignment. To follow up on Mr. Anderson's comment from the beginning of the meeting, this is a Southern only proposal because we're the North doesn't split into 4A and 5A in track and field. And so therefore, they're going to pick where they're going to be the most successful at and place themselves in 4A or 5A as an overall group. So we did not include them in our proposal. If that changes, if they are going to start splitting themselves between 4A and 5A, then we're more than happy to include them in our proposal, and I'll get on the phone with Menser and Parisi and some of those guys up there and include them. But our proposal here was created through the Southern Nevada Track and Cross Country Coaches Association. Going through, it's been very difficult to get a hold of all of our coaches right now. We had our state meet, we had one day of school, and then the summertime started. And so everyone that we've been able to get a hold of, and I started talking to coaches about this about a month ago, has been on board. Everyone that we've presented this to is in agreement that this kind of balances things out, but we just don't have an opportunity to get all, if we're including 1 and 2A, 61 Southern Nevada track coaches in agreement right now. So, and honestly, like in many of the sports, the teams that are 5A and are always going to be 5A and are always up in that mix, and the teams that are down in 3A and are always going to be 3A, and the teams that kind of always seem to fall into 4A, it's difficult for them to pay attention to me when I bring these topics to them. It's usually only our bubble teams, our teams that are at the top or the bottom of a classification that really focus in. But just like Rich's proposal, just like some of the other ones that I've read through here, this committee has always talked about both enrollment and rubric points being the 2 driving factors for placement. And we would like to combine those 2 together for track and field. Combining together your enrollment number plus your rubric score kind of balances things out. And I guess the right way to say this, are underachieving large schools don't necessarily get knocked down to 4A because they had a couple down years on a coaching change, or just, more kids were playing another sport at that time. And likewise, some of our overachieving smaller schools do not get bumped all the way up into 5A just because they had, a family of good genetics come through and we're scoring a lot of points for them at the regional meet. So there's a ton of data that we put together here looking at boys and girls rubric scores, which this committee has already approved for us in the last realignment, to combine those for school placement, so that way our boys and girls can be together. And then just adding in enrollment. And so really what we end up creating is something that all of us have looked at and it really passes the eye test. The 9 or 10 schools that should be 5A and can be successful at that level are in the 5A. And then our 22, 23, 24, it kind of depends on where you guys draw your lines when the time comes. Schools that are average sized for CCSD, an average size CCSD school. Usually these are our Title I schools as well. Some of our higher achieving charter schools would make the 4A group up. And then the 3A remains a 15 or 16 team group that has our 4 traditionals plus our smaller private schools and charter schools, which gives us good balance. We had talked in the last realignment cycle that we felt 3A should be more than just 10, 11 schools, because outside of Boulder, Virgin, Moapa, and Pahrump, the remaining 3A schools are all charter schools and small privates, and they are not bringing very large teams to regional track and field. Most of them are bringing 10 kids, 20 kids, 30 kids total on their roster. And so we felt that expanding that 3A up into 15 and 16 teams really helped, balance it out and create a little bit more parity through the 3A. We've put into here that we feel a Title I protection for the 5A would be really beneficial. I know that's something that, to my knowledge of listening in on these meetings and speaking at these meetings for the last however many years we've been doing it, has never really been discussed. And so I know that may be a new thing that needs a lot more research to be done. But the 3,000 plus outer donut schools of Southern Nevada should be 5A. Every single coach we talk to agrees with that. They are the teams that can have success at the 5A level. They're going to field full teams. They're going to be attending multiple invitationals. They're going to have bigger coaching staffs. Our Title I schools, our smaller schools that have enrollment down in the 2000s are not there. And we've seen it's hard for them. Examples that we can give you, a few years ago, Rancho had a good group of girls, very, very talented kids, multiple Division I athletes. They came through there, did a great year. The rest of Rancho's track and field program was incredibly average. But because of that, Rancho's program went up into the 5A and struggled mightily. Right now, we're seeing that out of Canyon Springs and Legacy. Both of them have some situationally talented events. They got a couple kids that are doing really well in a few events and a couple kids that are earning medals at the 5A and qualifying for state. But overall, their overall track program does not belong there. It's kind of hard to liken this to like a team sport. If you have a 5-star wide receiver on your football team, but everyone else is very, very average, I don't know, maybe you should be 5A. You probably shouldn't, because the rest of your team's not at that level. But in track and field, the way that the rubric is written right now, a handful of really talented kids, 2 or 3 kids, and I don't mean handful like a lot, 2 or 3 really talented kids can move your entire program up into the 5A. And what we've seen, and just by looking through this, if we average 3 or 4 years of data together, including the enrollment in that factor, we balance things out and things get to where they need to get. And honestly, I don't know if Bart, if you scrolled onto that last page that I had, it is the 4-year merge of it. This one right here, correct, sir. Thank you. The 4-year merge of it. This is really balanced out. Clark, Rancho, and Desert Pines have kind of become not an issue by any means, but they're big magnet schools. So their enrollment is at or just over 3,000. Even though their rubric scores put them down as very average 4A level teams. And so every time we did this, Clark and Rancho still kind of ended up there. Canyon Springs, is a magnet as well. So some of those bigger magnet programs, I know there's 3,000 something kids at Clark, and I know there's not 3,000 kids out on their track program. And so trying to use this enrollment and rubric together to balance them out is what we're asking. A Title I protection would be great. Again, I know that's a very new concept to this committee, and I know everybody would want to talk about it some more, but we feel that enrollment is a driving factor to track and field success outside of quality coaching, which we can't control, this committee can't control. But I've ran this through every coach that I can get a hold of. I will not email them all right now over the summertime. It's just, I feel that's out of line. But as soon as we get back in August, if this committee is on board with exploring this method further, I'll get everybody together. If we can't get everybody on board with this, then I'll come through and drop it. I mean, I'm not going to push something that we're not all on board with. You guys have done very well by both cross country and track to, when we asked to combine the genders for rubric scores, we're able to get all coaches on board with that. So everybody I've talked to is on board with this, and I hope that you guys can agree with me on it as well.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Ms. Habig has her hand up already. I'll let her ask a question or make a comment.
I love all the data. Thanks, Tyrell.
No problem. I'm better at spreadsheets now than I ever have been.
You look like you're great at them. I was looking at where you were saying like the Title I schools would be protected from 5A.
Yes.
The only issue I see with that is Title I changes every year.
That we talked about that, and honestly, the teams that I have highlighted in red were a Title I list that our Coaches Association president was able to track down, at least for the average citizen with a Google search. It's not very easy to figure out who all's Title I anymore. And so that is a limiting factor. That is something we talked about. And again, another topic that this committee would have to go through. And I don't know if you can average that. I don't know if you go through and be like, okay, we're going to align now for the next 3 years, but your Title I today, but I know that the state or the district just changed, or maybe it was the federal government who is Title I, and a lot of schools lost that designation. So there are concerns with that. But if you look at this 4-year kind of mega merge, we called it, the balances it out. Honestly, if I was aligning today, I'd look at this 4-year mega merge. I'd go Liberty through Arborview. There's only 500 points between those 5 teams, or those 9 teams. There, move Faith Lutheran up, because I've already talked to their coach. They'd want to come up, and that break between Arborview and Clark would be the break between 4A and 5A to me. You know, we've struggled with the current rubric because it's great, but it kind of weighs some average 4A teams and 3A teams a little bit stronger than they would be, because it only factors in kids who qualify to regional finals, and the 9th place kid in the 5A who didn't make it to regional finals is almost always going to be faster than the 8 kids that qualified for 3A and 4A. And so that his team or her team is not getting points for them having that depth, which is why you see like a Canyon Springs, and right now Canyon Springs and Legacy up into the 5A off of a small handful of talented kids, but they do not have a overall 5A caliber program where they're scoring points in almost all 18 events. They have coaches for all 18 events, you know, and they have these rosters of 150 plus, 200 plus kids, which is what you see out of Liberty, Shadow, Palo, Centennial, Coronado, DO, Arborview, these bigger programs that every single coach looks at and says, yeah, those are the 8, 9, 10 teams that should be 5A.
Thank you. Mr. Paul Anderson, I know you and I talked before the meeting. There was a little bit of concern here with the Title I designation, I think, as we kind of looked at this, and I don't want to put words into your mouth either, sir, if you'd like to speak to that.
Yeah, Tyrell, I think you've done a great job on this. Is there a way we could eliminate use of the reference to Title I and just base it off of enrollment numbers?
Absolutely. You know, I can retype this whole thing up if you need me to and delete that line.
The only reason I raise that is I see that as a potential. Somebody could look at this from a standpoint of that being discriminatory.
Understood. And obviously, you know, schools that were up or down based on that could. When we've started to average the 4 years worth of data together, the info that Bart has up on the screen now, that need for a Title I protection goes away. And we know that schools can come to this committee. And if we went through and like what we're looking at right here is took these 10 schools, and if Clark came in and was like, look, we have 3,100 kids in our school because we are this IB magnet, but our track roster is still only at 85 kids or whatever, I think this committee could easily look at that and be like, you know, they're correct. Their enrollment has them up a little bit. Clark is not into that 5A pool right now because of their rubric score. They're up there because they have so many kids at their school. So removing the Title I protection is is something that we talked about as a coaches association. And honestly, we knew it would be, I don't want to say a red flag, but a topic of conversation here and with you, Paul, in your office up there. And if we can't work with that, then we can't work with that. I don't want to create that issue. I don't want that to spread across all of our sports, and suddenly every Title I program that is having success in basketball or football or baseball or whatever says, no, bump me down so we can win a 4A state championship, whatever it is. So if that's a problem, I completely understand it. Our coaches understand that as well, and we're willing to waive that off, because again, when we start to put 4 or 5 years of data together, the enrollment and the rubric score kind of solves that problem for us anyway.
Yeah, and I just think it could potentially be viewed as a discriminatory designation, and so I'd prefer if you could eliminate that. But
yeah, strike that from the record then.
And I was worried also from the standpoint that if you're designated Title I, that just because you're Title I, you can't move up, you can't be the best. That's where it would really become a problem.
Okay.
So that's the concern I had.
Yeah, understand. And again, track is a unique sport. And I mean, they're all unique sports, but my world is track and field right now. And a lot of the barriers to success that Morocco talked about with schools under 3,000 kids for football, you see that with Title I for track and field. But we can remove that, because again, the rest of the data that we have gets us where we're comfortable at and where we want to be in the first place.
Mr. Larson, you've got your hand up, sir.
Yeah. Tyrell, it just looks like the biggest change I'm seeing is just using the 4-year instead of just a 2-year that we've been using mainly.
Yeah, we would love to see 4 years worth of data, even more used, because that really gives you a better picture of where an overall program's at, and not just I have 3 really talented kids that came through the program, scored us a lot of points their junior and senior year, and now we're completely out of place for the next couple years, which you see in track and field. But yes, the enrollment to us just kind of balances things out, make sure, and this year we look at it. If you look at rubric only, this year, like Coronado's down in the average 4A pack because their boys had a down year. I don't think there's a single person out there in the track and field community, or even in the athletics community, that thinks Coronado track and field should be a 4A program. And so by adding in their enrollment, it kind of bumps them up. And we don't want Coronado to have a down year on the boys' side, get put into 4A by this committee. And then they have a new coach over there. She gets everybody dialed in, and you see what happened with Arborview this year. We had this issue with Arborview. Arborview won regionals by 200 points on the girls' side this year. They were, got put into the 4A, and, had their coach really coached them up, had a couple kids come out that they didn't expect to come out. And next thing you know, they're just dominating everybody. And so by saying, look, you got 3,000 kids at your school, you could be good in 5A. You need to coach them up and get your recruiting going, and don't just kind of say like, oh, we're down, put me in 4A mentality. And I, like Rich talked about in football, and Bedowitz talked about in basketball there, and what we've seen through some of these, enrollment should be a factor in this. It should not just be performance based, because I think we all struggle with placing next year's kids based on where last year's kids finished up at.
So Barter, Paul, how much of a change would that make it if we did it with all sports, where we did 4 years worth of rubric points? Would that help for if we had adopted this part into basketball, into baseball, whatever other sports we're using?
Mr. Anderson, I'll let you take it first.
I think that's part of the, the timeline rule policies and procedures. That's part of the rules that you would use. And if you felt that 4 years was better, which it probably is, somebody's got to do a little more work, but it might result in a better result.
So there wouldn't be a big issue with the NACs or regs if we went.
No, I don't think so.
I'm not on this committee and never have been, but I've sat through, I think, every meeting you guys have had for the last 5 or 6 years. I was under the impression that we were supposed to do that in the first place. However, COVID threw a big wrench in that data accumulation, and we haven't had that data since. But again, I could be wrong, as I've not read everything and sat through every minute of these meetings.
Mr. Anderson, I just love your use of the word somebody. Would have to do a lot more work. Thanks. Appreciate that. Mr. Jackson, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I want to remind the committee that many, many years ago, we started out with a 4-year alignment, and after 2 cycles of 4 years, everybody complained and said it was too long because of I like Tyrell's term, the genetic code that came through. We had teams that did really well for 4 years, and we had teams that did really poorly for 4 years, and they wanted to realign. So that's when we jumped to 2. I don't think there is a happy number that will ever be perfect. I think it's best case scenario. And best case for the times we're in. So I want to be very careful that we jump back to the 4. I'm not saying one way or the other. One other thing I would ask, I don't think this would be in any violation of any current NAC that we have. We'd be using rubric and we would be using enrollment. It would just be changing the formula. If I'm correct.
It would be a success factor. How we get to that success factor is through the policies and procedures of what we choose to use. Mr. Anderson, if you wanted to add anything on that.
No, and that's right in line with the reg as it's written now. It encourages the use of multiple criteria. So yeah.
So then with that train of thought going that direction, I want to remind everyone that at the last meeting that we had, there was a definite slant or tilt of the 3A to have some sort of, I don't want to use the word escape because I don't think it's a good word, but the word I'm looking for doesn't exist, to avoid or to realign the charter schools out of the 3A. And by looking at this, we're totally doing that with all the proposals today, putting the charter schools right in with the 3A. Not that I think that's bad or good, and I'm not trying to disparage any group. I'm just saying that the theme today seems to be more of the 4-5, as opposed to the theme at the last meeting, which seemed to be 3 charter schools. I think we need to look at that very carefully because what this does is kind of flying in the face of what the 3A proposals were that were brought forth earlier. So I'm just trying to be the guy with the comment that maybe helps somebody think of something else.
I'm going to object to the word somebody before long. Mr. Jackson, thank you for that. One thing to follow up on with what you said before, I see Mr. Larson's hands up again. When we talk about 4 years of data and 4 years and 2 years and all that stuff, we're talking about a realignment still that would happen every 2 years. This next cycle's 3 years. We'd just be using 4 years of data over that course, or 5 years, or 6 years, or whatever we choose to use. It wouldn't change how often we realign. It would just be encompassing more data, which may be more relevant, may not be more relevant. We don't know until we go through it all.
And that's what we as track coaches are asking for, is just 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, whatever that number comes up to, and this committee makes that decision, gives a better overall picture of the quality of program coming out of that school, rather than just.
And Tyrell, I want to jump on your bandwagon here for a minute. I think if you remember, Bart, correct me, please tell me I'm wrong, but one of the other concerns was they were saying it wasn't apples to apples, it was apples to oranges when somebody had jumped from 3 to 4 or 4 to 5 or, back and forth. But what Tyrell's put together here in his mega merge, which I really, really do like, the data that it points out, is it kind of mitigates that apples to oranges comparison, because it is such a broad amount of data that they've pulled from, if I'm not mistaken.
You're 100% on with the apples to oranges. We were worried about when you went 3A, 4A. We alleviated that in some sports with the factoring of a weighted win, a weighted loss. That I'm not getting into all that stuff. But no, you're 100% correct. I'm going to save telling you you're wrong till when you get into the position of executive director. Mr. Larson, you've got your hand up, sir.
Yeah, no, exactly. My comment wasn't about changing the number of years in a realignment. We like the 2-year realignment. I just wanted to make sure we were good to have 4. And the proposals about the charter, that was a basketball only thing that was coming out that so far, as far as the charter private type thing there. So I don't see that's the only one that I've seen is from basketball, where there's that charter public private kind of thing going on.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Cooper regarding the track proposal that we see in front of us?
I do have one more, and I don't know that decisions aren't being made today. But I've put on here like a 9 or 10 team 5A Southern. Should Northern Nevada track and field want to come down from 5A down to 4A for the next realignment, we would be looking at something different than 8 or 9. We'd probably want to expand that a little bit more. And I know, again, I don't even know if that conversations have even started in Northern Nevada with Art and his group and stuff, but and I know if that comes up, I'll be back here zoomed in on one of your future meetings as well. But we feel right now 9 to 10 teams, and honestly, looking at this mega merge, it's 9 teams would make up a better 5A for Southern Nevada.
Anyone else with comments, questions? Okay, Mr. Cooper, thank you.
Thank you guys for having me today. I appreciate it.
How you've got a young child at home and still have time to do all this, I don't know, but more power to you, my friend. Thank you for being here.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you, guys.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to get back into our original packet. My goal is to be out of here long before 4 o'clock. I know Mr. Anderson has another commitment then as well. I do not want to rehash proposal 1, 4, 5, 6 that are all in your packet. Proposal 1 was the one I put forward, pages 24 through 31. Proposal 4 is the wrestling proposal from the north that Mr. Art Anderson has talked about in previous meetings. That's on pages 49 and 50. Proposal 5 is from the Northern Nevada football proposal. That was on page 51. We've talked about that one. Proposal 6 was the one we've referenced, Mr. Wakefield from Virgin Valley, on pages 52 through 58. That was a boys basketball proposal. That all being said, we did list this item as for possible action. I do not in any way want to encourage this committee to make a final decision on anything today. That's what we're meeting in August for. But I would leave this open if somebody wanted to, for instance, say, look, we don't want to look at this proposal. We don't want to consider it. Please don't bring it back to us. I'm going to assume that if nobody wants to take something out, we're going to bring them all back as part of the packet the next time we go around. That also, all being said, we have 8 proposals. It doesn't mean we have to choose one of the 8. As a committee, when we meet, we can take certain things from certain proposals and shape those policies and procedures, shape the outline of what we're going to color, however we'd like to shape it, and then color in everything else. I don't want anybody to think they have to be tied down to, this is the proposal I have to have, this is the proposal I can't have. I do want to open discussion on this. Again, I don't want to spend all night on this, but if there are things regarding these proposals you want to comment on now, if there's one that you want to get rid of now, we can take votes on that, or wherever this committee would like to go with this item. Or if you'd just like to move on, we'll bring them all back when we meet again. That's totally up to this committee.
Yeah, Bart, I have a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Kofer.
So I don't see it here, but I know that there was some discussion. Maybe I shouldn't be bringing this up about, I hate the term classless, but multiple classes involved as you break down into divisional settings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is that something that can be worked into any of these proposals to set those components of it? And then does the open, it sounds similar to track, mega merge, or whatever it is, per program, per sport, work within the confines of any playoff systems that would be put in place or could be put in place by the NIAA?
Could we? Yes. Could we combine some of these proposals? Could we put into certain leagues teams that are not within the same classification, which was part of the proposal that I brought forward, part of proposal 1? Sure. I'm more than willing to do work over the summer on this to try to look at some of these proposals and talk with Mr. Morocco about his, with Mr. Cooper about his, with Mr. Bedowitz, with anybody else who's out there on this, and try to come back in August with something that maybe shapes them all together in something that we never had thought about before. This committee has the freedom to do that again as well when we meet in August. I don't think we need to be tied down to any one thing here. I think we do have that flexibility. Would the mega merge that Mr. Cooper's talking about for track work for other sports? Oh no, we haven't tried it yet in other sports. Hard for me to say on something like that, but I think we could have several of us, anybody wants to be involved, work together on something like that to come back to this committee in August with and see what we can work out. Mr. Larson, you had your hand up?
Yeah, sorry, I keep on lots of
Good.
questions here. Sorry. I'm really curious how that if I feel like Coach Morocco's is very similar to the basketball one that was proposed today. I'd be really curious how the different sports feel about having that kind of system where there is an open championship in baseball, softball, volleyball, all the sports, and how other, I guess, sports north or south would like that kind of format.
I want to jump to Mr. Paul Anderson on that real quick. When we start talking about open things, we specify 5 classifications in the NIAA, and we kind of got around the 5 classification thing in football, which we said we were going to use as a trial for these 2 years by having 5A Division 1, 5A Division 2, 5A Division 3. Some people can argue that's 7 classes. We have it as 5. Mr. Paul Anderson, when we talk about an open division, does that in any way violate what we have in the NIAA?
Not if we call it the 5A.
Call it 5A open?
Well,
Yes,
let me
5A.
interject. It's only a breakout for playoffs. It's not a separate division during the regular season.
That's correct. And I think a lot of what we're saying is, like the football proposal that Rich Morocco had and the basketball proposal, those are really talking about, those are combining the factors that we've got in the realignment regulation. You're talking about geographics, you're talking about size of schools, and then you're talking about success factors. You're blending those to put together your leagues, divisions, and whatnot. And then you're correct that, the next step that this committee has to decide on is how are we going to break it all down for the end of the year for playoff and championship purposes. So, yeah, I don't think to answer your question, I don't think you'd be violating the NIAA to have an open division. And I think that might be the best way to look at it is how is this best work, and then how can we mold or fold that so that we can easily, turn that into a playoff type format that's satisfactory for everybody.
Thank you, sir. And the fun part of this is you guys are the tournament format committee too when we get to that point. So more fun for all. Anybody else real quick here?
Yeah. Dallas
Mr.
Larson.
Larson. Yeah.
Doesn't that, I feel like it works really well for a lot of sports, but track, I don't see how the football would work for track, for cross country, I don't see how it would work for those sports, but for a majority of the sports, I see how that would work really well for a lot of these team sports. But swim, track, like I said, those sports, I don't know how that, so we might have to have a little difference between some sports than others, but that's just my opinion on that football proposal.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, we've had different rubrics for, let's call them team standings based sports than we've had for the more individual based sports, golf, cross country, swimming, track and field, sports along those lines. So that has been a little bit of a different, and then we've had kind of a similar rubric for all of our sports that to this point we have qualified for playoffs based on your league standings is maybe the best way to describe that. Any other comments or questions on this item as we talk about the review of the proposals? Okay, so I'm not hearing anything that we want to get rid of any of these proposals at this point with any of that, and I'm fine with it. I'm not trying to guide this committee in any way, shape, or form. We'll bring back the proposals that are on the table and quite possibly try to merge some of these that are on here for our next meeting. Mr. Kofer.
Well, I think per Mr. Anderson and of course, I'm the charter school liaison and a homer for us. It sounds to me like the charter private breakout isn't feasible.
From a separate classification standpoint, correct.
Exactly.
For a league standpoint, we've got flexibility, I think, but I don't know that. Again, I don't know what the appetite is for that either.
Okay.
Can I just make one suggestion? I think, there's maybe no appetite to get rid of any of these, but I do think there should be work over the summer, and I'm happy to help you. And, maybe all of these come back, but we're gonna have a really long in-person meeting in August. And I would suggest we come back with a proposal for team-based sports statewide and a proposal for individualized sports statewide. And then, the committee can maybe hammer that out, get the information to everybody on the committee a week or 10 days prior to the meeting. And we can hopefully get a couple of different proposals that would work, and that kind of satisfies I think everything for everybody. I know we can't make everybody happy, but I think we could come close.
I know we can't make everybody happy. I'm 100% certain of that. Mr. Art Anderson, you've unmuted.
Or just real quick, and along with what Mike just said, there are certain things like with the Northern Nevada football proposal that obviously, unless the NAC is changed, which is not going to happen, then we can't force enrollment protected schools to go higher in classification.
Right.
So there's certain proposals like the Northern Nevada football one that won't necessarily work, or like the one that Mike talked about that is separating private and public. Yes, in leagues it could work, but not necessarily towards playoffs, or I don't know, something like that.
100% understand what you're saying, sir, on that. And yes, that's something we can look at. In regard to Mr. Paul Anderson, yes, somebody signs up for that summer project. Here we go. Put some stuff together. If anybody would like to also kind of take a look at some of those, please. I don't want to get into any sort of violation of any sort of open meeting law. We're not going to do that. But if we can come to kind of taking a look at some of these as we have time and shape them and put them together and bring it back as proposal 9 and say, look, let's take a look at this first and see if this satisfies everything. I'm on board with that. I don't know how the rest of this committee feels, but sure, let's do what we need to do and let's get it done. Mr. Larson.
So clarifying, Mike, what you're saying is, by the league, is if the charters were the mountain side and the publics were the desert side of the 3A, we'd still be within the NAC. That didn't change anything. Everyone's still playing for a playoff spot. Just who we play during the regular season. Is that what I'm hearing? Would be okay?
As far as on my end, I'm gonna have Paul Anderson get into this too. You'd hate to have an argument from those schools that are being deliberately placed in that way if they have no appetite for it, but we can place leagues how we need to place leagues to create a whole separate classification and tell the charters or privates or whomever they have to go there. We can't do that part. Mr. Paul Anderson.
That's why I wanted the clarification. I heard there is within the league, there's some wiggle room. So is that kind of the wiggle room that you guys are talking about?
So can you state the question again, Dallas? I just want to make sure what you're saying.
So I'm hearing, between the private charter public that, we really can't make a separate division in the state, but within a league, we could create, I was just saying, for example, the 3A South could have public schools in the mountain and then the charter privates in the desert. And then you're still playing towards, everyone's still playing towards the same state championship. And
so what I was talking about in terms of what we can't do and what the board of control would in essence have to do if that was the appetite, to take charter and private and make it its own classification. That would be like a 5A, 4A, 3A. Those are the classifications. Then you'd have a private/charter classification. That's a whole different subject. That's a whole different issue. That's an amendment to the law right now. However, if you want to, if you're not doing that, I don't know what you would be doing in terms of taking privates and charters and having them just play each other. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't play with the public schools anyway, because they're going to compete for championships with them right now. Does that answer your question?
No, I just, I just, as far as seedings for tournaments and different things, that's all I was just curious if how we determine who's in the desert, who's in the mountain. That I don't know if that's not this committee, is it? Right? We could in the 3A, we could do the serpentine, we could do the geography, we could do it by
Yeah, that's what you did in the past.
or if we wanted to, we could do it by public and charters. Even though we're playing each other in league, when it comes to tournaments, they're seated in a different way.
That's theoretically this committee's job, at least as it's been done in the past, is to put those into leagues. We have given leagues the flexibility after the board has approved a proposal to, let's say we don't like this because we've got too many teams in one league and we want to split into 3 leagues instead of 2. We've given that sort of flexibility before, but we've always stayed within that range. Do we have to stay with doing it serpentine method? No, we've got the flexibility there to create how we want to create. Mr. Jackson, you had your hand up a moment ago.
A couple things. One, Dallas, always remember this. Mathematically, I highly doubt Virgin and Moapa have always been 1 and 3 or 2 and 4 or any way the serpentine is. But those two have always been put together in the first league. Boulder City and Pahrump have always been put together in the second league. Then we serpentined it through. So the flexibility is always there for that. I would really, I don't have a vote on this. I'm more of an observer, but I appreciated the 2 proposals brought by Rich and by Tyrell today. I would really like to see those developed out to the rest of the sports to see where that fell. Bart, I would be glad to work with you on the 4-year mega merge with other sports if that offer is out there. If that helps you, because I think those would be interesting stats to look at and very unique dynamic to look at as well for all team sports in that sense.
Look at you trying not to kill one of your employees before you actually start in that role. I appreciate that, sir.
Slow death, my friend, slow death.
Somebody needs somebody. If you'd like to help, we'd love it.
So can we make a recommendation to have that by the next meeting, is to have what that would look like in other sports?
I think we're open on this. I mean, it's a possible action item here when we talk about review of proposals. Mr. Paul Anderson, we're within what we can do here to make that recommendation, I think.
Yeah, I mean, or, just through this discussion, you can bring it back that way. If somebody wanted to make a motion to do so, that might be best.
I'd like to make a motion to see if we took the football proposal and broke it down into all the sports to just kind of see what that would look like at our next meeting for baseball, softball, and then for the non-team sports, the mega merge, I guess, for lack of a better word, right? Or are those 2 separate? I feel like those are 2 separate things. The mega merge is for the individual sports.
I would like to see the mega merge for all sports.
Oh, okay.
Do them both.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Let's be clear. Mr. Larson, you were starting to make a motion here. I want to make sure we have whatever that motion is clear here first.
So I'll motion that we take a look at the mega merge and the football proposal and how that would break down for all sports by next meeting.
There's the motion on the table from Mr. Larson. Do we have a second?
Sean Fitzsimons, 2A South, I'll second.
Any other questions or discussions regarding the motion on the table? Okay. If you're in favor of this, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Please indicate by saying nay. Okay. Motion passes. Somebody got some work to do. Anything else on item number 8 here before we close it out on our review of the proposals? Okay, let's close that item. We'll move to item number 9. Committee members' comments for the good of the order. Anything out there that we need to add from our committee here at this point before we all decide it's time to go find a beach and lay in the sun? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 10, public comment. This time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the committee about any matter not listed on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until notice procedures of the open meeting law have been met. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, It is asked that said person complete a public comment card and submit it to a committee member prior to the opening of this item. A limit of 3 minutes per person and/or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments that are deemed to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. We do have a couple of people up in our office in Sparks still with us. Is there anybody there, Ms. Lotz, or anyone else who's on standby in our office who wishes to make any public comment from our NIAA office?
No, there is not.
It's a long way of saying, is there anybody there? Thank you. I have nobody here making public comment. Does anybody out there have anybody live public comment from anywhere they happen to be? Okay. Have a wonderful summer, everybody. Please go relax, have some fun. I will get, with the help of a few people, what we talked about in item number 8, getting that proposal worked into other sports and see how that would factor out in advance of our August meeting, and we will get that out to you. Again, we are planning August 27th or August 28th in person to meet. I'll be reaching out to all of you to try to get information that we need. Beyond that, thank you for all the work you're doing, for all the time you're putting in. I appreciate it more than you know. At 3:41 p.m. on May 30th, our meeting of the Realignment Committee is adjourned.